I purchased a 3-bedroom condo in Toronto, Canada 5 years ago when I was in my second year of medical residency. Soon after the purchase, I rented one of the rooms to my roommate to offset the costs of the mortgage. I live in one room, she lives in the second, and the third is my study/office. She has been a great roommate from the beginning. We aren't necessarily friends, as in we don't do things together for fun, but we get along exceptionally well. The entire roommate/tenant relationship has gone swimmingly up until recently. A couple of weeks ago, my roommate broke the news to me that she is pregnant. The father was a fling of hers, who does not want anything to do with the child. My roommate has decided she wants to keep the child anyways, and raise it on her own. To me that seems like a huge challenge, and I admire her for it. The issue is, while I don't necessarily dislike children, I have no desire to live with a baby. While the condo is a fair size, I will most definitely be woken up by the babies crying at night. My condo is also where I like to come home to and relax, like a haven after a long workday. And the idea of coming home to a baby honestly seems absolutely chaotic. Especially since this isn't my own child, i.e. one that my girlfriend and I decided to have / was mentally prepared for. As difficult as it was for me to do this, I told her essentially what I've written here. And that it would be best if she finds somewhere else to live. I am not rushing her out or anything like that. I have given her 6 months notice. Since any later than that will come too close to the birth. She was honestly quite taken aback by this, and thought that I was being cruel. Her primary concern is that rent has gone up substantially in this city since she signed on with me. I haven't increased her rent since she moved in, so she's essentially paying 2015 rent. She works as a waitress, and will likely need to find a lesser apartment to keep within the same budget. A couple of other considerations are that she was out of work while restaurants were closed. But I did waive her rent for that period. All of the furniture is also mine, aside from her bedroom, so she would need to figure something out on that front as well. Aside from all of the child expenses. I understand her position, and I feel horrible about the situation, but I honestly can't do it. I haven't been able to give life much thought lately, as work has been quite busy. Firstly, I have a friend in real estate, and I'm going to see if they can help her try to find some affordable listings. Secondly, as I don't plan to take on another tenant after her, and can afford to do this anyway, I have decided I'm going to waive her rent for the remainder of the tenancy. This will hopefully give her a bit of a boost to get on her feet. I consulted an attorney to be 1000% sure, and this is perfectly legal. Since I live in the unit, the eviction laws are much more lenient. Her baby will become a toddler, and a toddler eventually becomes a school-age child. Will it really be any better to do this later on? When I came home from work today, I told her that I wanted to discuss the overall situation. Before I even began, she actually apologized to me for how she spoke to me, and for expecting that I would be okay for her to raise her child here. I told her that her apology is totally unnecessary, as her reaction was completely understandable considering the uncertainty of her future. I then told her that I would waive her rent for the REMA. Almost all the marriages in my family have been arranged marriages. My mom's marriage to my bio dad was an arranged marriage, but it ended up in a messy divorce and him completely abandoning us before I was even born. My mom had a love marriage the second time, despite the disapproval of her family, and has been much happier with my stepdad than she probably would have ever been with my bio dad. Because of this, my mom has always been very adamant that she would not try to force us, my siblings and I, into arranged marriages despite what the rest of our family thought. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years now. We got engaged 2 months ago. He's met my parents and siblings, but as far as the majority of my extended family were concerned, I was single until 2 months ago. Early last year, my fiancé dropped me off home after work one day and my uncle was there. My uncle is the oldest sibling my mom has, so he's seen as the head of the family. He thinks he has a say in what the rest of us do. It was obvious my uncle was pissed, and he ended up grilling my fiancé, and I assume he met his standards. A lot of arranged marriages are about what both families can gain from one another, so he told my mom to get us married quickly. He wanted to make it look like we had an arranged marriage before the rest of our family found out. My mom ignored him and told us to keep dating if it's what we wanted. Over the past year, He's mentioned me getting married to my mom every single time he's spoken to her. Apparently, my uncle assumed just because he'd given the order that we were going to get married soon. He told my cousin, his daughter, that I had agreed to an arranged marriage, and because I had and she was older, she should agree to the match he'd found her. My cousin never mentioned this to me, but she did agree to marry the man my uncle found for her. They got married late last year. They haven't had a good marriage and my cousin is very unhappy. Her husband is incredibly controlling and hardly ever lets her go anywhere without him or a member of his family. Last week, she was over at my house when my fiancé came over to drop some of the clothes I'd left at his place over. When I told my family about my engagement, they all assumed it was an arranged marriage and I didn't bother clarifying because it really isn't anyone's business. You don't tend to do sleepovers if you're having an arranged marriage, so my cousin knew immediately it wasn't what she assumed. She started asking me questions about my relationship and I answered honestly. She got really angry at me and kept demanding to know why I didn't tell her about him. The thing is, I'm very close to this cousin, but I also know how our family is about dating and I didn't want my male cousins trying to strong-arm my fiancé. They've jokingly threatened this before. She pretty much blamed me for her arranged marriage and said she only agreed because she thought I was going to have one too, and if I had told her I had a boyfriend, she would have had the courage to stand up to her family. She hasn't spoken to me since. I do feel bad for her. I know how unhappy she is, but if she had mentioned what my uncle told her earlier, I would have clarified. I don't want this to be the end of our relationship, but I don't know what I can do to fix this. I've got cerebral palsy that affects both my legs and one arm. That's my official diagnosis, but what you really see is I walk with a limp. I'm a software developer, so job-wise, I don't have any issues. I knew when I was a kid that using my brain is the best way for me to survive on my own without relying on other people. I haven't had the chance to get my driver's license, but according to therapists and doctors that shouldn't be an issue. That's the background about me. My girlfriend and I have been together for a year. We met back in April 2020 of last year and we decided to get together in May 2020. I told her about my disability before then, but she wanted to try and make it work. We video call on Discord every day, almost always when we're awake, and recently we've been going on dates. She's more than happy to lend me an arm and she notices things about me that even I miss myself. Outside of my family, she's the most loving and caring person I know, and she's my motivation to do better and improve myself. Honestly, I never thought I could find someone I trusted enough to share my more negative thoughts and problems. I always tried to seem happy so I don't worry others. The emotional support she gives me is really irreplaceable. The problem is scared that, in the future, she will have to take care of me or most of the work will fall onto her. To make matters worse, her mom has been telling her for the past few weeks to break up with me because she can find better, and she doesn't want her to have the burden of caring for me. She's also really afraid that I will get arthritis early due to my cerebral palsy, and if that happens, a lot is going to be on her. I've tried doing things like stretches and exercises to maintain and improve my muscle tone, but she is still afraid I'll get worse. I'm an introvert, I don't know a lot of people, and honestly, I don't even know the options I've got to look at. I want to prove that I can be independent and that if things do go wrong, it won't just be on her. I'm in Ontario, Canada. Are there things I can look into and do to assist with my disability, or things I can look into so if things do go wrong, I won't be a burden on her? I'm at the end of my wits. I've never really hated my disability, but I've always kept myself going by tempering my expectations and thinking, my disability is going to make it really hard to find someone, and she's the first person to make me feel like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I want to do anything to show her that I won't hold her back in the future, but I'm out of ideas. Is there anything I can do? I don't want to worry anyone I'm with these issues, but I'm at the end of my wits. I don't even know if my relationship is lost, but I don't want this to happen again, and I want to know what I can do myself so I can reassure my partner, so they know I won't hold them back in the future. I don't know if there are things I can look into to better plan my future so it's not a concern for my partner. The worst part is, I've always thought my disability doesn't matter. But with all of this happening, it's really hard to convince myself otherwise. My brother lost his job along with all his savings several months ago, and soon after he asked me if it would be okay. if he and his wife stayed with me until they could afford their own place again. I hesitated at first, considering I only have a one-bedroom apartment, but according to them they had no other options, so of course I invited them over and bought a blow-up mattress for the living room. For the first month things were manageable, although admittedly cramped. Then my brother told me that sleeping on the mattress was giving him back pains. So he asked if he could buy a small double bed for the living room. The living room is by far the biggest room I have, so I told him that would be fine as long as there was still room for my couch, TV, bookshelves. The living room is also connected to my kitchen in an open plan style. So I reminded my brother to leave walking space around the bed. It's now been 2 months and things have gotten a lot worse. When they first moved in, I would still use the living room every day to unwind on the couch after work. Now whenever I go in, there's a strange vibe like I'm intruding. My brother and his wife are often sitting in bed together when I go in. I always knock and stare at me pointedly until I leave. Sometimes when I sit down they will directly ask me for some alone time and say they would like the room to themselves. This came to a head yesterday when my sister-in-law messaged me with a timetable she'd made of when it would be a good time for me to use the living room. The timetable basically says that they will allow me into the room for an hour each evening, plus 20 minutes around meal times. I basically shut her down instantly and told her there was no way I'd be following the timetable since in the end it's my apartment. She sent me back a huge message with a dozen paragraphs about how my constant presence was ruining her marriage with my brother and they feel like they have no privacy. I tried to talk this over with my brother that night, but when I got home neither my brother //SIL were talking to me. So he's clearly just as pissed. Today an Amazon parcel arrived for my brother with a lock for the living room door, which I told him there's absolutely no way I will allow him to install. My brother says I'm creepy for wanting constant access to where they sleep and he's insisting on installing the lock anyway.